When it comes to building muscle, everyone thinks you need to go on this massive bulking program because that's what they've seen bodybuilders do. But the truth over 40 is very, very different. In this video, I'm going to share most of the common mistakes I see people over 40 making in the effort to speed up muscle growth. In most cases, they're not speeding it up at all, and what they're really doing is damaging their health by following these patterns. The original purpose of bodybuilding was to make the body healthier, and if you follow these rules, you'll actually improve your overall health while gaining muscle at the same time. When one of my clients came to me, he had some simple goals. He just wanted to feel good again. He'd had a history of doing some very physical activity. He'd had some previous injuries from high-level sport when he was younger, but he'd gotten to the point where he was in his mid-40s and he really wanted to get back that feeling of physical confidence that he'd lost over the last decade or so. In these pictures here, what you see is the very first photo in the top left is his very first photo when we started training. The second photo next to it, top right, is 6 months later without any specific diet work. Now, what makes the next two photos outstanding is that those two photos were only 6 weeks apart from the first one, and he gained 6 kilo from the second photo to the fourth photo. And I'm going to teach you how to do it while not gaining fat, just like my client here. Now, the number one biggest problem for people when they start trying to build muscle is they think they need to bulk, because that's what bodybuilders have done for years and years beforehand. And they see them go on these ridiculous 5,000, 6,000 plus calories a day diets, thinking that they need to eat the house down to force muscle growth to happen. The thing they're missing is that these guys are on truckloads of anabolic steroids and growth hormone, which make the entire process much more different than what's happening in a 40-year-old body. And when you look at the effect of steroids, just in case you didn't believe me, look at this study here, which shows that even if you're lying still and taking 600 plus milligrams of testosterone a week, you'll grow muscle. So when you add in that these bodybuilders are taking more than 4 times what this study shows, you start to understand that actually what's going on with you and what's going on with them when it comes to muscle growth and the ability to use calories to build muscle are two very, very different things. And problematically for us, if you look at this study here, it shows that when your BMI goes outside the normal range, so well above 30, which would be considered obese, you're actually at the highest risk of death. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not willing to chase death just to add a couple of pounds of muscle. To put this in perspective, bulking past 40 is just as dangerous for your health when your BMI goes outside the normal range as smoking. Being outside the normal range on the high end takes 4.2 years off your life, just like smoking does. Now, this meta-study here on about 500 studies shows there's a significant amount of sarcopenia or muscle loss up to 80. In fact, from 40 to 80, there's up to a 50% loss of muscle tissue, which is one of the reasons why strength training is being looked at so seriously now as an aid to longevity and healthy living. Now, the study showed over a huge range of resistance training formulas from 2 weeks to 52 weeks, an average of only 1.6 kilo of muscle gain per year. Now, you have to remember that's on people under 40, so for those of us over 40, the results are slowed down even more. How slow? Well, the average rate of muscle gain is between 1 and 2 pounds per month, or about a maximum of 1 kilo per month. Now remember, that's the maximum. That's the amount for someone who's under 40. For those of us over 40, with a full-time job and kids and probably not getting enough sleep and improper nutrition, you can likely halve that, and for females, maybe even half again. For those keeping score, that means about half a pound a month, or about 250 grams of muscle a month, is about the most you can reasonably expect. Right now, everyone's saying, oh, I can totally gain more than that. To put it in perspective though, that's still 3 kilo of muscle gain per year, which would be a tremendous amount for an over 40s trainee to be able to put on year after year. Now, when we break that down, 250 grams of muscle isn't a huge amount that you need to add fuel for. That's only 1,000 calories extra divided by the 30 days of the month, or about 33 calories extra per day. To put it in perspective, that's about 8 to 10 grams of extra protein a day you need, or about 30 grams of extra protein. That's like 1 scoop of protein powder per day extra to achieve hitting that muscular goal every single month. Now, I know what you're thinking, surely more calories speeds that system up, but it just doesn't. In fact, in this study here, it shows that while muscle growth rate was consistent for the people who were eating a calorie-controlled diet, as well as about 600 calories extra in the other group, what you actually see is that muscle gain was consistent, but body fat gain was far more in the extra calorie group. Again, muscle gain was exactly the same. Now, why would you want to add extra degrees of body fat past 40, when you think of all the different risks that come with it, and again, think back to what we said about BMI, higher BMI equals higher risk of death. That's a really dangerous thing to be playing with after 40. In this other study, we had again what amounts to a high food and a moderate food group, and what we found is that while there was more muscle gain in the high food group, there was also a whopping amount of extra fat gain. Over a 4-week period, they gained 1 kilo of muscle, but 1.2% body fat. So on a 100-kilo guy, they gained almost the same amount of body fat that they did muscle. In the second group, the more moderate food group, they only gained half a kilo of muscle, but only 0.1% of body fat. Now, I don't know about you, but I'd much rather trade off half a kilo of muscle and barely any body fat gain versus going up a whole percentage point in body fat and knowing what it's going to do to my health. And what we get out of both of these studies is that overfeeding doesn't cause extra muscle growth. It's only compounding other health problems. Another problem I see people doing is relying on supplements to replace real food. Now, if you haven't already seen my supplements are a scam video, click up here to get the skinny on why supplements aren't the thing you should be relying on and why real food is the real answer to all of your problems. Annoyingly, just after I put that video out, James Smith came out with a video about creatine gummies, and what it showed is that those things are basically just actual gummy drops. There's barely any creatine in them, and there are companies making millions and millions of dollars selling people what amounts to sugar. Out of all the supplements you can purchase, the only 3 that really count are protein powder, creatine, and caffeine. Everything else you really need in your diet for bulking, for building muscle, for getting lean, all comes from whole foods. But as I said in the supplements video, creatine works for real. And what this study shows is that the participants who took creatine versus no creatine gained another 1.4 kilo over the same time frame. So that says to me, if you're looking to gain muscle, creatine is definitely something you want to stick in your back pocket and make sure you've got access to it. The big thing about muscle building is we need adequate protein. How much protein? Well, somewhere between 0.7 grams per pound and 1 gram per pound has shown to be ideal. Adding extra protein doesn't actually speed up muscle growth. All it does is overload your system and cause expensive urine. The only time I would recommend higher protein intakes now are for someone like me who's gone through big surgery and needs the help with tissue repair, or maybe for someone on an extreme fat loss diet, like in my rapid fat loss video, because it helps stave off muscle loss. However, protein absorption does decrease as we age, so you might want to make sure that you take on slightly more per serve than what the usual recommendation is, just to be on the safe side. Now, at some point I always get asked about, what about plant proteins? Well, using soy protein, which is the #1 plant protein, there's found to be a few problems. And while we all know that soy protein's got less amino acids in it than something like milk or whey protein, we've also found that it's got some inhibiting factors for things like mTOR, which is a signaler for muscular growth. As far as I'm concerned, it's just another nail in the coffin for plant-based diets. We're designed to eat animal proteins, and that's the best way to go forward for muscle building. Unlike what most people suggest when they start trying to build muscle, I'm not going to suggest going on a free-for-all when it comes to your diet. You still need to track calories carefully. Using my client as an example, as I said, he gained 6 kilo in 6 weeks. Now I know that's just not possible to gain 6 kilo of muscle in that time. At best, there'll be 1 kilo of muscle gain in there based off all the studies on muscle growth. So what's the other 5 kilo? The other 5 kilo is a little bit of body fat and a lot of water retention, because every time you increase muscle size, you increase glycogen storage within the muscle, and that comes with some water retention. So realistically, my client's got 1 kilo of muscle gain, maybe 1.5, and then he's got 3.5 to 4.5 kilo of fat and water gain. We don't need to add fat and water while we're trying to add muscle. So by tracking his calories carefully, I've actually managed to keep things in control. We've slowed down the rate of weight gain, and yet now we can actually see his pictures from week to week. You can still see the muscle quality improving, but that's only muscle gain at this point. His weight has stayed stable. And the reason we know his muscle is improving is because the strength numbers that he's showing in the gym are going up. If your strength numbers are going up, you're definitely adding muscle. Strength gains will usually happen in the first 4 to 8 weeks of a particular training cycle. The gains that come after that are all going to be muscle gains. So we've already seen the small gains in muscle activation and skill from increasing ability in the lifts, and we're now into the muscle gain phase of this particular training program. A final tip for fad dieters is that irrational fasting just isn't going to work. While there's a lot of studies to show that 1 meal a day is ideal frequency for losing weight, there are no studies that show that for gaining muscle. In fact, 3 to 4 meals a day is far superior for gaining muscle based on all the studies I managed to find. This study here, for instance, shows that a protein-enriched breakfast, a moderate protein lunch and a moderate protein dinner is more effective than trying to get all your protein intake in at dinner time, just like a 1 meal a day philosophy. The other thing is that when you're talking about getting in 1 gram plus per pound of body weight a day for protein, it's not very easy to get in enough protein in single meals. It's going to be way easy to break it up over the day. And remember, as we get older, protein needs might increase because our absorption rates decrease. So trying to get in a heavy, high quality protein meal at the end of the day with all of your daily protein needs in a single meal just becomes unmanageable from an appetite point of view. You're going to end up eating less, and that's the opposite to what you're after, why you need to be in a slight calorie surplus. Now, when you look at the results that my client got, you can see pretty clearly the first 6 months, he made amazing progress. We did zero diet work at that point, other than me telling him a base calorie target for every day and a protein requirement to hit. There was no juggling of macronutrients for how much protein he should be having versus carbohydrate, or how many grams of this kind of fat versus that kind of fat he should have. Very easy to follow recommendations. The bottom photos, all about very specific diet recommendations. The training has been very simple to allow this to happen, and we've alternated between periods of what amounts to bodybuilding work and then periods of what amounts to low rep strength work. Obviously, I write the program precisely for him based on his needs, his abilities, his previous injuries, but I wrote this program that does exactly the same thing as this and alternates between periods of volume and intensity. You can find it on my website. It's a super easy to follow program, and I guarantee that if you follow it to the letter, you'll actually get the same results, provided you're tracking your diet properly and using the tips in this video.